the experts to the table, sought the input from the experts, and then brought that input to the state board for their consideration. So that's the process actually involves a lot of people giving input in terms of really that have expertise in the standards, as well as what items would you have to do well on the assessment to prove you know those standards. And the board is adopting that, but holding the department accountable to fulfill that process.
And when will that be determined for this new test? When will the cut scores be determined?
The current timeline is that the standard setting process, which is establishing what those cut scores are, we will bring expert panels together in July of this year, then take those data to the state board for their consideration in late July. They have to put it out for public comment, so I would anticipate them taking an action on that at their September meeting.
Oh, okay. And you're not here to hear this discussion, so I'm sorry, but I have to ask. So I'm being told that we're going to give the students the test, then we're going to look at that data, and through that data, then we'll determine what the cut score is? I guess the question is, will you use any of the testing data to make a determination on the cut scores?
What you do is you look at the difficulty of items to help establish those cut scores. So let's say that you give us students an item and almost all students get it right. Well, then the data tells you that every kid should get that item right. And so that one obviously would be an item that you'd say, yeah, all kids should be able to perform well on that particular item. And so you get a sense of how your items performed. But when they're doing that, when these expert panels are doing that, they don't know that, oh, if we set it here, then this percent of our kids pass or don't pass. They don't know how many pass or don't pass the overall assessment when they say this is where the cut scores should be set. In other words, this is the number of items these kids should get right before they can be considered on grade level compared to these standards that we have.
No, I understand that.
The board knows that, but the panelists don't know that.
Right, but if we're making a test based on our standards, on a curriculum that's being taught correctly, that's what we should be grading on the test, not whether or not enough do it. And I'm going to leave it there because I'm just completely amazed and disappointed. But I also wanted to go back to Mr. Halcrow's comment. Our business world wants to know right now.
I think it's important to note that the way we're setting the cut scores is the way the state sets the cut scores, which is an assessment, I think, that has a lot of strong validity and actually has a high reputation.
Well, I guess I just imagine the testing being done in such a way to where it's I think more of our problem is that we have districts who are not aligning their curriculum with the standards, and that could be for many, many different reasons, anywhere from the cost to availability of staff to get through it fast enough. But I think the issues really are we're not making sure things are aligned. And Mr. Halcrow's right about some of it. Yeah, input is important, but at the end of the day, when I'm getting ready to hire someone, I want to know whether they can do basic mathematics, and that's what I'm hearing. And whether you went to preschool, you didn't go to preschool, and you had good teachers, you had not so good teachers, but scores at the end are going to tell you whether or not you have a better chance of being successful at whatever career you're going to go into. And that's why when I look at these scores, yes, I know it's not, it's throughout the whole state, but they're not changing. And I guess that's what I'm looking at more or less, is that it seems like maybe, and it may be those who are behind never do catch up, for whatever reason, but I'm wondering whether or not we're really giving the tools to the districts that they really need to make the difference here, and are we looking into this in the right direction to see that? Or are we just going through a process, taking the scores and not really utilizing them for all that they could be worth? Because there are districts in the states now that did what Mr. Neese talks about, in which they look at these scores, they do the intervention, they look again and do certain testing to make sure that those interventions are working, and that's how you catch them up. So we may not be doing that, but there's districts now that are doing, not districts, but states that are doing awesome work at this point, making those catch-ups. But you've got to have to be able to monitor them very closely to be able to do it. So it might be something we may want to look at. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Halcrow.
Yes, if I could respond to Representative Wilson. I mean, I agree. But here in Anchorage, when I look at the Anchorage School District, I mean, there is a reason why the graduation rate at South Anchorage High School is 92%, and the graduation rate at my alma mater, East High School, is 75%. South Anchorage is in an upper middle class neighborhood, fairly homogeneous population. My old high school is the most diverse high school in the country. And we all know that there are significant education challenges the more diverse the population is. And that's what gets back to the business community wanting the districts as well as the state, which provides data that you, the policymakers, make decisions and funding decisions on, to consider those inputs. The 75% at East and the 92% at South don't have anything to do with the quality of the teachers, doesn't have anything to do with the curriculum, because as you know, each district, as you just stated, each district aligns their own curriculum within their district. So there is a definite reason for that, and a lot of that has to do with socioeconomic challenges in the way public policy addresses that. I mean, like I said, great teachers at South, great teachers at East High, a 17% difference in the graduation rate.
Thank you, Mr. Halcrow. Mr. Morse, I have a question, and that is, and it really, I'm just going to bring up Common Core because I can. If we have, for all intents and purposes, adopted standards that very much mirror the Common Core standards, and if we determine, I guess what I don't understand is if we determine with our state school board that we're proficient at a much lower cut score than fill in another state, then we really have not adopted any Common Core, I can't look at what my kid brings home and said, you bet, my kid is at the same level his cousin is in Massachusetts, so we really haven't done anything. So I thought that was one of the reasons that we adopted these standards, again, that mirror other state standards, so that we could compare from state to state, recognizing, I think, that we've become a very global world and we want all of our kids to do well. So I don't understand this cut score issue. I would think that we're all going to say that you took the test and here's what you got on the test. So tell me why we have these call them what they will. Alaska state standards that closely mirror the other states, but we're putting our own cut scores together.
Chair Gaddis, we have to put our own cut scores together in part because we're not using the same test as the other states. Our test.
Okay, so I get that, and I'll cut you. I'm not gonna. We're not using the same test, but we have somewhat the same standards. Why even have the same standards then? So there's this brouhaha about the standards, and we don't have the same test. We go round and round, and that's unfortunate, but we can't compare ourselves with the lower 48 at this point.
Chair Gaddis, I'm not suggesting when we have our cut scores we will or will not be able to compare ourselves. I think there is an interest from the state board, and we've heard legislators have an interest of being able to say, when we have a new assessment, it would be nice to say, how do we compare to other states? And that's why one of the things I think is important for us to do is look at the cut score setting process that some of the larger consortiums are doing and see if there's something that we could do that patterns after that. And then if the state board goes down that direction, you ultimately could have an assessment that says, well, we're giving two different assessments. In the initial year, at least, you're going to see very similar performance from one state to the other. I'm not the one going to set those cut scores. Ultimately, the state board is going to do that, but that is the information that we are putting before them so that they can consider that. Because at the end of the day, we can have two different assessments, but they are testing similar standards, and hopefully we could have that kind of a direction as a possibility. But ultimately, that's what the state board